Roman Polanski's 1968 classic psychological horror, Rosemary's Baby, ignited Hollywood's obsession with the occult, paranoia, and all kinds of evil nastiness creeping into the home. But the big game changer when it came to demonic nuisance was obviously 1973's prime evil seminal classic, The Exorcist. After that, fans and critics became absolutely delirious with old Lucifer and all of his evil buddies, and soon screams and gasps and carnage could be heard throughout the world as spirits and demons and poltergeists tore through movie houses in films like The Omen in 1976, The Omen 2 in 78, The Amityville Horror in 79, and of course Stanley Kubrick unleashed Jack Torrance in 1980's The Shining. And just when you thought it was safe to put your Bibles away, in 1982 Tobe Hooper turned on the telly and unleashed Poltergeist. So it should probably not come as any surprise that my forgotten horror movie gem for today was sadly overlooked by some horror movie fans, and also, I would say, unfairly treated by some of those critical critics. Released in the same year as Poltergeist, and much like a lot of the horror movies I just mentioned, The Entity is also inspired by a creepy and apparently true event, or so the end credits claim. Now, it would be easy to accuse The Entity of jumping onto the bandwagon of a lot of those other similarly themed horror movies released during that time. In fact, the production company behind this film initially wanted none other than Roman Polanski to direct. But I have taken up the quest of trying to convince you that The Entity is not imitation, but rather innovation. The Entity stars a simply brilliant Barbara Hershey, whose performance in this alone is enough to give the film its gem status in my opinion. She plays an attractive single mom who is repeatedly sexually assaulted and tormented by an invisible assailant. Now let me tell you, even by today's standards, where viewers are largely used to and even desensitized by graphic violence and explicit content in film, I must say that even for a 40-year-old film, I found myself to be seriously unnerved during the film's rape scenes. And apparently I'm not the only person to think so, as upon its release, the film was met with a lot of women rights protests due to the offensive and graphic nature, particularly in those assault scenes. Now, although I really like this film, I have found myself defending The Entity against certain critique.
Formulaic, cheesy visual effects.
Too long.
Irritating soundtrack.
Come on, the film is 40 years old. I mean, yeah, sure, some of the visual effects are a little bit dated now. And formulaic, same story. I promise you, it wasn't formulaic back in 1982. And as far as the irritating soundtrack goes, it's a weird soundtrack. But this film was trying to do something different. It was trying to make the audience feel really uncomfortable while sitting in their seats. And the soundtrack certainly contributes to that. It contributes to the whole off-kilter and uncomfortable feel this film was going for. And as far as it being too long, okay, maybe it is a little bit too long, so you got a point there. Sorry. But once all of that is said and done, there is much to appreciate about Sidney J. Fury's nasty little classic. For one, underrated character actors Ron Silver and Alex Rocker are an absolute point in this. And there is also a near show-stealing performance from David LaBiosa, who plays Carla Moran's son. And just for some creepy behind-the-scenes trivia that every film of this nature simply has to have by now, in a scene where Labiosa's character is trying to protect his mother from the entity, finds himself thrown back and rewarded with a broken wrist for his efforts. Now, the actor David LaBiosa really did suffer a broken wrist in that scene. On-screen accident or paranormal intervention? But the film really does belong to Barbara Hershey, whose performance in this is not only nuanced and courageous considering the extreme emotional range and the sheer violent nature of the scenes that she had to endure, but she always remains in control, interesting, intimate, and even manages to bring a certain light touch to the role. Another thing that I absolutely love about this film is how it evokes a genuine sense of discomfort and unease with its use of what filmmakers like to call Dutch angles. Basically, these are unconventional camera angles and weird camera framings. All of this makes a person feel rather claustrophobic and odd. Uncomfortable and voyeuristic. The Entity, along with getting under the skin and being really tense and even terrifying in its depiction of sexual violence and psychological discomfort, is also a really well-told story, to the point that I feel its plot and structure have been mimicked over and over again through the years. For a film that was accused of being an imitation of Poltergeist, and yes, the two films do share a similar space, you've got to remember that The Entity, although it was released in the same year as Poltergeist, 1982, it was actually completed an entire year earlier. Now maybe Poltergeist is the immediately more enjoyable film. I do feel that The Entity is actually the braver of the two, and that it tackles deeper and heavier themes. Now, although I haven't heard of many filmmakers that have credited The Entity as being an inspiration, I would like to ask a certain James Wan why he cast Barbara Hershey in his Insidious films, or if those rumors of him being involved in the Entity remake are true. The Entity, sometimes scorned, often overlooked, exemplifies what a horror should do: scare, build intention, be entertaining, and also push some boundaries and ask some uncomfortable, if not interesting questions, like, for instance, how much of a link is there between so-called paranormal trauma and real-life past trauma? All of this is on good display in the film's bathroom scene, where Carla is violently assaulted by her assailant. It's not the film's most disturbing scene. For me, that dubious honor belongs to the one where she is raped in full view of her son and two daughters. But it is a scene that slowly and confidently and quietly builds in tension, only to later erupt into total, terrifying, immersive chaos. Now, for all The Entity's heaviness, it still remains a fun film to watch, which I know sounds kind of weird considering the serious content, but it's a film that seems to know how far it can or should go without ever becoming cinematically gratuitous or senseless. So there you have it, fans of horror, 1982's The Entity, my forgotten horror movie gem for today. Have you seen it? If you have, let me know what you thought, and if you haven't, maybe you should go out there and check it out. I'm pretty sure that you'll like it, and even if you don't, maybe you'll appreciate it after watching today's episode. At least I hope that you do. And are there any horror movies that you like? Maybe a horror movie that you feel didn't quite get the love that it deserved upon its release. Maybe I'll do an episode on it. And if you guys like Den of Horror, and you like all of this crazy creepiness, drop us a comment down below, jump on that subscribe button. It keeps the psycho circus rolling and it inspires me to bring you a little more. I hope all of you ghosts, demons and entities out there enjoyed today's episode, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you all on the flip side. On that note, I wish you all a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay happy, and most of all, stay horror. I'm out of here. But it's a film that seems to know how far it can or should go without ever becoming cinematically gratuitous. Without ever becoming cinematically gratuitous. Without ever becoming cinematically gratuitous.